Well, in the last 6 months we've renewed all the frames, the sawn frames that were made of oak that were all split. We've made up laminated frames in pairs and fastened them in with bronze screws through the planking. And then the intermediate frames were steamed oak frames, so we've made new oak frames and timbers as we call them, and put them in and put copper nails in and riveted them, whereas before they were only clenched, what we call clenched, where the nail heads are just bent over on the inside, so we've riveted them, which is a better job. We've also replaced quite a lot of the planking, especially up the counter, which was very badly repaired before, not a lot of steel screws in, so we've replaced that with second-hand pitch pine to use the same type of wood that was used in the build, because you can't get pitch pine anymore. You've only got a type it's not the same species, so it's not as resinous. So I bought a big second-hand beam out of a mill, which has still got resin in it like new, and we cut all that out to make the counter. So on the port side, the counter's nearly all new timber, and on the starboard side, maybe half of the counter is new timber.
Yeah.
And then we also replaced the garboard plank, which is the first plank off the keel, and the second plank up from that. We replaced them in Iroko because it's just a harder wood than the pitch pine planking, so that they were all fastened in the same way. And then we also replaced what they call a sand strake, which is like a rubbing strake on the bilge of the boat, to take the ground if she ever leans over with being at hard side. If she lies on a bilge, that takes the strain. So that's about twice the thickness of all the other planks, and it's rounded over for a section about 8 foot long in the middle section of the boat. So that was replaced. We've also replaced what you call the stern knee on the inside of the boat, and that's bolted through the false keel, which is new as well. And the stern post was split and had various pieces put in, so we've replaced the stern post, the aft end of the stern post, with a new piece of Iroko, and we made a new rudder trunking, which is also in Iroko, and that's all bolted through the old stern post and through the deadwood knee at the aft end. And then we've also replaced where the laminated frames fit in the boat. We've made laminated what we call floors, which go across the boat and tie the boat from side to side, so they're bolted and screwed with bronze fastenings through the frames all the way down the centre part of the boat. And then on top of that we've got a new kelson, or keelson some people call it, and that again is bolted through the floors through the wood keel only, because at this time the ballast keel, the iron keel, wasn't on the boat. So we bolt the floors through the kelson, through the wood keel, and tighten it up on the kelson with bronze bolts. And then after that we put the iron keel. Well, the iron keel was taken away and was sandblasted and then epoxy coated with epoxy tar, so to stop it going rusty. Then we put new stainless steel bolts right through the iron keel, through the wood keel and through the kelson, and set the bolts up on the kelson, so the whole thing was like a kind of box girders and very strong. And then up forward, the stem again was made in lots of small pieces, the outer stem, so we cut all that off and straightened it out, took all the old iron fastenings out and laminated a new piece of stem, which is bolted on again with bronze bolts through what's called the apron, which is sort of the inner part of the stem. That's all bolted together, and then the upper part of the stem, which is sort of from the waterline upwards to the above the deck, that's a new piece of oak as well, and the whole lot's bolted together with bronze bolts. After all that work was done, we caulked the planking. The bottom was all done with oakum up to the waterline. This is oakum, and it's pulled out in a kind of string by teasing it out, and you make it into a thin rope, if you like, and put that into the seam. This is hemp soaked in Stockholm tar, which preserves it. So we do all the underwater section of the boat with oakum, and then we do the top plank of the boat with cotton and that's because when you knock oakum in, the Stockholm tar tends to ooze out of the seam sometimes, because when you knock it in with caulking irons, and that might affect the paintwork on the top sides. So we did the top sides that were going to be gloss painted, probably white, with cotton, and that's not as good preservative wise, but it still lasts a lot of years. This is caulking cotton, which is a bit of a rough piece, but you get this in a ball of cotton of 8 strands, and you spin it together in a drill to make it a bit like a soft string, and then you put that in the top sides with special caulking irons and a mallet. That's a special mallet, and that seals all the seams above waterline. So at the moment we're getting ready to put what you call a shear strake in, which is the top plank of the top sides, and that's going to be in Iroko, because it needs to be strong and it needs to have fastenings in for the deck, so it's better to fasten to than the pitch pine, and that's where we're up to at the moment. All the laminated frames and the steam belt frames all came from Scotland. So I found a man up there that he said he advertised Highland oak, and also he can cut very thin slices of oak on a special bandsaw that he has, and then he has a sanding machine. So the laminated frames we made, all the laminates have to be the same thickness, and they ended up being 5mm thick by about 60mm wide. And so I was going to originally cut them out of Iroko, but with Iroko you can get very bad grain at times, and when you're cutting wood so thin and then planing it through a planing machine, it tends to chew it up and chunks fall out of it. So I thought in the long run it was better to get him do it, because he had this specialist bandsaw and sander, so he was assured that the thickness was the same. So that's why I got it off him. Took a while to come, but eventually it came, so it saved us a lot of labour time doing it that way, but the actual wood cost quite a lot of money because it was such good stuff and good grain, so we didn't end up breaking any, because normally when you steam timbers you can say maybe 20% of the ones that you cut out will break, because either the grain's not good in a particular place, or sometimes you don't get the steam right. You might have the wood too long in the steamer if you have a problem with one timber, and then the timbers are in the steamer still steaming away. You've got to be quick fire, get them out quick one after the other, and you've got about 10 seconds to get them in place before they go hard. Being oak, you can't, because you knock the copper nails into the oak timbers while the oak is hot and soft, because you can't knock them in. If you try knocking a nail in a piece of oak, it will just bend, especially a copper nail. With putting them in when it's hot and somebody holds on the inside with a big hammer, because they're square section nails, so when you knock them in the hole, even if you drilled a hole and knock them in a round hole, they pull the timber together by holding on the outside of the nail with a thing called a dolly, and on the inside with a hammer, and the whole lot pulls together to the shape. Because if you don't get it to the shape, you'll never get it to the shape again, because once it goes cold, that's it, it's in place. The only other thing we've done with the boat is we've primed all the bottom with a paint called Primacon, which is for underwater sections of the boat, and we've given it about 4 coats of that, so it's ready for anti-fouling when we get ready to that stage. And then the top sides of what we've done so far have had just about 2 coats of white primer, so when it's all coated and finished, we'll prime all the rest of it, undercoat it and gloss it with whatever colour you want. Well, the next stage is we've got to make the shear straight, which is the top plank on the top sides. That's going to be Iroko, and it's going to be a bit thicker than what it was before. It's going to be 1.1 inch thick, which is about 1/4 inch thicker than the rest of the planking, and that's because it needs to be a good strong point of the boat, and also the deck, which is going to be marine plywood, is going to be fastened into that, as well as the beam shelf, which has to be fitted on the inside of the frames. So the whole lot, the shear plank and or shear strake as we call it, and the beam shelf, which is a stringer which runs on the inside of the frames, they'll all be bolted together, and wherever there's any fittings going through or things like chain plates for the rigging. There'll be pads or packing pieces running between the frames, in between the beam shelf and the shear strake. And then the next stage after that, we'll work out where the beams go, where the main beam goes, where the mast position is. And there'll be two main beams there and what we call mast partners going between them, which is a chock basically, which takes the thrust of the mast. And there'll be because we're having a deck step mast rather than a keel step mast like it was before, there'll be a post underneath those two beams down to the kelson. And then the other four deck beams will be fitted with what we call a king plank down the middle, and then the plywood will have to be joined down the middle. It's going to be half inch thickness plywood, or 12mm as it's called now. And then when that's all fastened in all the way around the boat, there'll be side decks and aft deck on the counter, and then it'll all be sheathed in glass cloth and epoxy resin to seal the plywood. And all around the edge of the plywood on the outside edge, it'll be capped in a hardwood edging so that there's no bare plywood showing anywhere. After that, the cockpit will be made and the cockpit coamings put in. And then it depends what we're doing in the way of an engine. We'll be having to drill the hole for the tube through the boat and fit the old stern tube in, and then make engine beds and for whatever engine we have. So that'll be that job to do. And then there'll be a new rudder blade to make and fit that, and a new tiller. And then after that we've got the mast to make as well. We've got the wood for that, that's silver spruce. So we're making a hollow silver spruce mast, which will be round in section, and the bottom part will be square for about 2 foot because it's going in a tabernacle, so that the yacht club can drop the mast down in the winter time and just hinge it down rather than having to get a crane to lift it out. So that'll be a spruce mast about 25 foot long, and it'll be hollow so that we can get wires like a ducting up the middle to have wires for a masthead light, and if we want an aerial or anything like that on for VHF. And then the boom will be the same as before. It'll probably have to be scraped and revarnished, and the gaff and the bowsprit, they'll be similarly treated. And then it's a case of rigging, and I presume you've got the sails. After that we'll be sailing maybe. From the main road, about 250 metres away.